Last week we talked about inner wisdom and enlightenment, and today we'll talk about faith, inspiration, and love. But we will put a twist on these typical concepts we all know so well when we use these appealing words. We'll share a couple of slides and talk more about the need, especially in the current environment, the need to live with more faith, find more inspiration, and maybe most of all, have more love in and around us, as that will truly make a difference in our lives. Living our life in the here and now is truly important. Why is that? Because we have received our lives to be able to prepare for the inner breakthrough, so that the spiritual light may penetrate more and more deeply into us. This light will make us aware that we are a crucial part of the powerful divine plan that stretches from eternity to eternity, to make us aware that our deepest being is part of a heavenly symphony. It is part of a cosmic dance and a radiant joy. So why don't we realize that yet? Or maybe we are just barely realizing it. Well, it's because we are still unfortunately closed to that light of the spiritual sun. And we actually may be grateful for that, because if the full light would reveal itself within us, it could be too much. It could completely disrupt our current life. Symbolically speaking, if a crack appears in our shield and rays of divine light are able to enter our system, we may experience them as inconvenient, even sometimes painful. But we may also view these rays as a gift, because at a certain point in our lives, we will start to see both ourselves and the world in a different light. Then an entirely new development will become possible, one that is connected to the unfolding of the divine potential hidden deep within us, like a well-known symbolism of a mustard seed. This mustard seed may have already germinated within us, ready to grow into a tree of life. These words are, of course, only images indicating that great plan actually lies hidden in everything that has been created. This divine plan is a great mystery. We cannot possibly know it, but we may experience it, and we may try to attune our lives accordingly. In today's world, we are, however, facing an enormous clash between the ordinary natural personality and the growing soul consciousness. And it is important, maybe now more than ever before, to prove the words, "If you have faith as a grain of mustard seed, you will be able to move the mountains." And here we are referring to the enormous power of the faith. The point here is that even with a little bit of faith, the size of a tiny mustard seed, we can overcome immense, mountain-high obstacles in our lives. What mountains are we trying to move? It's mountains not outside, but inside of us, as ultimately the greatest challenge is to be able to change ourselves. However, one can possess as much faith as his soul power extends, because the power of faith stems from the soul, and that is why the situation is so complicated. But now is the time to prove that faith can guide us through all difficulties. And of course, it is important to know that this is possible. Faith is our immunization against anxiety, worry, and fear. The binding through faith is indeed a very strong power, but it is only the beginning. It is no solution in itself. Millions look upon Savior in faith, but only when a true seeker comes to a standstill on a horizontal level, then the true divine power comes to touch him, not through the ego, but through the rose of the heart, and so it's penetrating directly to the soul center. People who look upon Savior in faith will not and should not accept this disorder. Instead, they should continue to seek a solution, to seek a breakthrough. Because the seeker does not just come to a standstill in this phase of belief. Instead, he seeks the path. He seeks the method by which, and with the help of which, he can open his own blood being of this nature for the life substances of God's nature, which can indeed cleanse and purify as a fire. Today, we find ourselves living in times of change. Consolidated structures are eroding as new cosmic forces drive mankind towards new consciousness and renewal. This development finds its purpose in building a regeneration out of degeneration. These profoundly changing circumstances force us to become aware of our soul and to start being inspired by it. And how can we do this? Unfortunately, we don't really have a quick and easy answer to this question. But we might search for inspiration in the classical holy texts of different traditions, or in the writings of the spiritual teachers. They may be able to alter our vision on the relationship between God, cosmos, and man, to ignite the soul flame within us, and to illuminate the spiritual path for us. That spiritual path is often seen as the start of a long and demanding journey, and in a way that is true, but those who devote themselves to true spiritual development soon experience that in practice, almost everything is different than they had imagined. To actually follow the spiritual path requires that we find the inspiration for this in our own lives, in us, to become aware that we are twofold beings, affected by both heaven and earth. On this basis, and through this urge from within, we will strive to give expression to our inner heavenly being in daily life. Although the journey may be long and at times difficult, it is a journey that everyone must begin at some point. And the good news is, the journey is doable. It is possible, because every single person is ensouled, even though it is hard to explain what the soul really is. What is the soul? Maybe all we can say is that the soul is invisible and immeasurable. Some of you may know that scientists have tried to prove the existence of the soul by weighing a human body before and after death. But the average of 21-gram difference in weight that was discovered still has not made the soul any more tangible. So we can conclude that The meaning of life and soul is not by definition covered by natural science. It is covered by a science of the soul, because it refers to a quality of the human soul. And that is really how it should be, because if we do not give meaning to our lives, and we experience little or no inspiration at all, depression will be looming on us with its consequences. But by giving a meaning to our lives, we can slowly discover our vocation as a human beings and follow it. We know that scientific instruments can be made insensitive to magnetic influences by, let's say, surrounding them with a layer of lead. We can also isolate ourselves from certain influences by no longer be so much actively engaged in events around us. If we are just leading a nice life and enjoying our possessions, our soul will fall asleep, and we will focus only on the material world, which will never be able to give us overall complete fulfillment. That desire will always remain, and every time when we finally receive what we want, it will again become clear that the excitement is only in the chase, and desire will constantly drive us towards achieving more, towards reaching for something better. The science of nature is limited to perceivable things, with our 5 senses and their extensions. But according to the science of the soul, the world observed with our senses is only one out of many dimensions we can experience, and it is definitely not the most important. After all, everything in the sensory world is constantly subject to change and breakdown. Nothing is permanent. But when we approach the light in all sincerity, when our attitude towards the light is founded on yearning, the Gnostic light will always work in healing, helping, impulse-giving way. This is an internal, universal law of love. In this way we arrive at what is called the knowledge of the heart, Gnosis, and that means knowing from the inside out. Gnosis is not the property of a particular philosophy or religion. It is universal because it is connected with human experience. There are many different currents that can be described as Gnostic, and what they all have in common is that a human being is viewed as twofold, mortal and eternal. They teach that we can go the path, fulfill our inner calling, and can be transformed into a new person, new man. Between the man of this nature and that divine man, there is a wide gap, and divine power of love is that bridge. Love is the mediator to cross that gap. So, if we don't have this love, we have nothing and we are nothing. It is the stream of love, with a capital L, which is the Gnosis, which is the Spirit. And this love, of course, has nothing in common with the ordinary dialectical emotional streams or with sentimentality, which we all know so well. And this has to be so because the human being is not yet fully complete, and he must undertake this development of his inner inspiration and under the guidance of his living new soul. It is still possible to hear this inspiration, this voice of the spirit spark in us, and that is why our time is so critical. It is certainly, we can say, an exciting time in which we all live now.